Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus. Our woman in focus today is a very special person. I had to think for at least 7 days before interviewing her as to what I'm going to be asking and how am I going to be interviewing her. When I first interviewed her, I was in 2002, July, and she was number 7 Women in Focus. Our woman in focus today is a par excellent journalist by the name of Belle Puri. Belle, you must welcome our program. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Do you remember that day?
You've reminded me, yes. I do, but we have different memories of it.
So since 2002 and today, 2021, when I first met you, and this is me talking about you, looking at you and saying, she is one of our first South Asian women that have been on mainstream media. I think Canada-wide, you probably are the first one.
I think so, yes.
So you went on to radio and a sports journalist. Tell me a little bit about that.
I did. I was very much a hockey fan and wanted to be a sportscaster. There were no females giving sports reports in those days. So I started at CKNW, started in the newsroom, behind the scenes. It was a very different era. These days we see a lot of people coming into major market newsrooms and immediately they are on the air. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the case when I started. You had to do your time, you worked nights, you worked weekends, you worked all the holidays, and you worked behind the scenes. So slowly I came into the newsroom, and then slowly with my confidence building, please, 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 may I do sports? Did that, was given that opportunity. It went well for me.
Right.
I was okay. I knew what I was talking about. There was no problem there.
Right.
But it didn't go well.
Really?
The world wasn't ready for it.
No.
And so we had to step back. And then shortly after I stepped away from that, Laura Ornest joined CKNW and as a sportscaster and did very well.
Yes.
Went at NW and then later at CBC and throughout her career. And I always tell her, and it's a good thing we're really good friends.
Now, from radio, you branched out to television, and was it BCTV at that time?
It was BCTV, which is global now. And so I spent 11 years at CKNW and then went on to BCTV and learned how to do TV on the job. Didn't know how to do it. Didn't know how to do radio when I got to radio. Didn't know how to do TV when I got to TV.
No, so face of journalism, I think, has changed with digital media. And now, anybody who can write, "Hello, I am so-and-so," is a journalist.
Pretty much. They're not journalists, though, because they have not been trained in the standards of,
Yes.
of being a journalist. Everyone has a phone, everyone has a device. So yes, when news breaks out, everyone just starts recording.
Right.
I mean, I think most recently some of the situations, violent crimes that have unfolded in the last few weeks, like even I'm astonished when within minutes of hearing the sirens, you're seeing a video on Twitter or on Instagram. You're seeing victims of crime fighting for their life. You're seeing bad guys running away. It's incredible.
Right. Would we call that journalism?
Journalism is to be informative correctly.
Yeah.
Even amongst outlets, never mind the citizen journalist. Being first it's nice, but being correct is much better.
But have the rules and regulations relaxed for journalists or this particular field, or is it just I am feeling that way?
No. Corporations, media corporations, broadcast corporations still follow CRTC rules. None of that has changed or been relaxed within corporations. I can only speak for the CBC.
Right.
We have our JSP, our journalistic standards policy. We adhere to that so strictly. There are checks every day. There are JSP reports every Friday. Here are the stories we covered. Here's why we made these decisions, why we decided maybe not to show someone's face or not to broadcast their name while everyone else was. As reporters, we answer to our bosses every day about how we justify this. Now, what happens is what you've talked about in terms of where people get their news and what is circulating, which makes it difficult for us in newsrooms because all of this information is out there already.
Yes.
But, we need to make sure that we have it from the correct sources.
Right.
And we don't just take it from one source. We have to have multiple sources confirm something for us before we tell you. To having, and then people get news so fast. And the digital world, the online broadcast, you say it and it's gone.
But does it ruin your story as well?
No. No, I as a reporter, if I'm assigned something, I will approach it as if no one has seen it, heard it, read it, and collect my information accordingly. And as I say, just have to make sure that it's accurate, particularly when it's in print, because that doesn't go away.
No, it stays there forever.
Those stories are there forever. And that is something that I've learned in the last few years as it has become digital first in many newsrooms. Get the written version done first and then deal with broadcast. How much more careful I must be. So there's no leeway for any sort of loose facts at all. If that's kind of a oxymoron, but you know what I mean. You just can't. You have to make sure. If you have any doubt, and I've had to do that with myself, it's like, okay, I know that, but do I really know that? Do I know it 100%? No, I don't. So we either wait till I do, or we take it out.
The reason why I wanted to interview you, another reason, many reasons, one of them was that you recently got an award, RTDNA.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What does that stand for?
Radio, Television, Digital News Association.
Right. So,
was that a trick?
We have to do this all the time. You will ask me some trick questions as well. So I wanted to talk to you about that, awards. That is one way of recognizing the hard work that you put in. But I want to take a short commercial break and come back.
Okay.
Belle is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Belle Puri, who has been a journalist for as long as I remember.
A long time.
30 years at least?
At least.
At least 30 years.
More.
Okay, more than 30 years.
Yes.
So Belle, when you were born, were you given this name?
Belle?
Belle?
Yes, I was.
That's your real name?
It is my name. May I tell the story?
Yeah, please.
My grandparents, maternal grandparents, my Nanaji and Naniji had friends, and there was a lady named Belle. My mom grew up knowing Belle, and so when I came along, that's what
named it?
Belle. Apparently, my Naniji wasn't too impressed, but that's what happened. But just really quickly, jump ahead many decades, because I always used to ask, like, Belle, who was Belle? So I was at a extended family gathering. This man came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Stuart," and I knew the connection. Said, "Nice to meet you," and he said, "This is my daughter, Belle." And I laughed because I've never ever met another Belle. And my mom and dad weren't there at the time.
Right.
And so Belle and I spoke, and I said, "Wow." And she says, "I was named after my grandma." And I said,
Yes.
"Oh," I said, "I was named after a friend of my grandma's." Then my mom and dad showed up, and I'm like, "Her name is Belle." And mom says, "Yes, you were named after her grandma."
Isn't that just beautiful? That's a lovely story. Your mom was also born here.
In Duncan, yes.
In Duncan.
Yes.
And you were born not in Duncan, but in
New Westminster,
New
Royal
Westminster.
Columbian Hospital.
Wow. No wonder you're so partial to Royal Columbian Hospital. Well, as a journalist, and I'm talking about real journalists, okay, so we won't talk about the fake journalists at all. Talk about journalists who have to research a story. First of all, look at a story and then say, is there something hiding behind this story? Then you go and dig in. And you got an award for one of the stories just recently, and that was the Imam story. So I'll talk a little bit about that first, and then your very first story for which you got an award.
The Imam story is something that came to our newsroom long before we actually were able to put something out to our viewers, listeners, readers. And it was something that one of my colleagues saw in the community and knew that it was a story. Like, she recognized that. But she also knew it was going to be tough to get the person. This was a story about sexual assault, and she had been in touch with the victim, but was the victim willing to tell her story? And sometimes, you know, stories come to us and they just percolate for a long time, and sometimes they slip off the side of your desk. But I give all kudos to my colleague who was persistent. She's young, she's full of energy and just starting her career in journalism, but recognized that it was a story.
And you guys released that story and you got an award for that.
We did, for investigative. We were able to tell the story told by the victim, but then we also discovered that this Imam had quite an interesting backstory. His 20 years almost of misleading immigration officials, and how many different names he managed to use to keep coming back to Canada, even though he had already been deported under the other name. The family he had in Pakistan that no one knew about.
Right. What an interesting events, like a web.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, the very first story that you wrote and you got an award for that, do you remember that?
Well, it wasn't the first story that I produced, but I believe my first award was when I was with BCTV, and it was in the late 1980s. And a cameraman and I went with the Vancouver Aquarium crew to Churchill, Manitoba. They were going there in those days, because that's how it was, to capture beluga whales.
Oh, wow.
And we went there thinking we were going to stay for 2 or 3 days and then come home. But it was one of those stories that just absorbed you. And we stayed, I think, 8 days and saw it from beginning to end. We were in the big freighter canoes as they went out to capture the whales. We were there as they were loaded up on cargo planes to bring home, and ended up actually flying with them back to Vancouver. And the stipulation was that if we were going to be on that plane, that we could do our work, but we also had to pull shifts looking after the whales, keeping them cooled down and getting them here. It was a fascinating story, and things have changed so much since then. Like now, there are no, you don't capture them, that's for sure. And the few that are still in captivity have left and gone to other aquariums in North America. Times have changed.
How much has journalism or your own field changed?
It's changed by leaps and bounds. Radio has changed as well, but TV is what it's really visual in terms of equipment. And I think I came into TV just as they were, wrapping up, where you had the big deck. So you had to have a crew. You had 2 or 3 people. There was so much equipment to carry. And then, we had those wide mouth tapes, and then we went to the Beta SP, and then moved on to the cards and on and on. And now, in a pinch, if I have to, I can shoot on my iPhone.
There you go.
You will see some of that. It's not my first choice, but until a camera operator is able to join me, or I'm not even on shift and something's happening, it's technology is amazing, and editing as well, linear editing versus avid editing, being able to, before you'd put your piece together,
Yes.
and you'd be like, oh, we should have said this here.
Yes.
Well, in those days, you'd have to start from scratch and rebuild it. Now you can just open it up and drop it in, or move it over here, move it over there. There are good things, and it makes it faster. I mean,
Right.
it makes you more mobile. But it also then, people who are coming into journalism
Right.
are having to do it all. They are reporters and camera operators and
Yeah.
editors.
And that's what I was going to ask you. So now you have a camera person and you. That's it.
Yes.
And no audio person, because the cameraman will have to, fiddle with the audio. And you, sometimes I see just a reporter going.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fortunate when I go out, I have a camera person with me, because I don't know how to shoot.
Yeah, right.
But the young people who are coming into the industry now, they
Yeah.
have to know.
How to shoot as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you see them all the time. They're a one-person crew.
Right. Interesting. The changing world of technology.
And I always wonder, if you're doing that, if you're doing everything, it must make the journalism part of it very difficult.
Yes.
Because when you have two sets of eyes and two sets of ears, it's
Yeah.
way better. I think.
100%. Yes. We'll take a short break and come back.
Okay.
Belle is our woman in focus today. Don't go away. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our woman in focus today is Belle Puri. She's a journalist. You've heard her, seen her on television, heard her on radio. You're doing radio right now, right?
I am. So I've come full circle.
Yes.
Started in radio in a generation where you either did radio or you did TV.
You're right.
Or you worked for a newspaper.
Right.
Now, circle,
Yeah.
and we do everything. I'm assigned a story. It's technically supposed to come out in print on the web first, and then we do broadcast. And when I do broadcast, I do a radio version, I do a TV version.
Wow.
Um,
So now you're doing all three of them.
All three. Yes, everyone does all three.
Print, radio, and television.
Correct. Yes.
So, Belle, as a child, did you always want to be a journalist?
I had no idea.
No, eh?
No.
Just got into it.
No, and I've often wondered sort of where that came from.
Yeah.
And, I'm sometimes a little slow. It only took till, recently, a few years back, watching and listening to my mom and dad. And both of them are very good at just getting up and speaking. They've always been really involved in the community, and I've seen, but it took a while for that penny to drop, and particularly my mom. She's a great storyteller.
Yeah, well, I can vouch for that. So what makes Belle tick?
My family.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think most of my decisions have been made around, do I want to be away or do I want to be here? I mean, I think back to the early years of my career, especially in television, and especially once I reached CBC. People have said, like, you've stayed here. Did you not want to be a foreign correspondent? And those opportunities were there. They're always there. They're for everyone. Everyone
Right.
can apply or try
That's
to
right.
do it. And I didn't, because I wanted to stay home. And until one came along. At one point, CBC was opening a bureau in New Delhi.
Right.
And I was like, okay, this is it. This is the one for me. And I was all over it and applied. And I thought it was mine. I was pretty close. I
Yes.
think it was. And
Yes.
then, I don't know if you remember, but the great Patrick Brown decided that he wanted to work in New Delhi.
Yeah.
So Patrick went, but that appealed to me very much. I just
Right.
thought that was going to be a great fit.
It would have been a great fit
Yes.
for you. Yeah. I mean, you would have brought both the Western and Eastern perspective together.
And I was excited about it. It was something that I really wanted to do. But even in my 20s and 30s, it was important to be close to my family.
So you are the caregiver for your mom and dad. You are the primary caregiver for them. You've always been with mom and dad. And so, do you ever see that as a hindrance to your career?
No. No, it's my choice. And just for the record, my brother and I do share. It's a team. And,
Yes.
my sister-in-law.
Yeah.
Actually, yes, can't imagine doing any of this without her.
Without them.
But it's a balance, and a work-life balance, and a thinking through your priorities. And, they looked after us when we were kids, so now it's our turn.
Yes, I agree with you.
You did the same.
Yeah, I did. That's a very Eastern way of thinking, I think.
It's being reflected and people are noticing, but
Right.
just recently one of my colleagues in a major market media left her job to look after her ailing dad. And doesn't have an Eastern background.
Right. What is it that you feel that you wanted to achieve and you haven't, or you've achieved whatever you wanted to?
I think I'm happy with how it's unfolded.
Yeah.
I've had so many opportunities. As you well know, what we do opens doors
Yes.
to places that could never imagine.
Right.
Seeing, experiencing. We ask questions of people. You meet them and ask them the most intimate questions within seconds of meeting them. It gives you license to learn, and I've learned a lot along the way. There are always stories to tell. There's no shortage of stories to tell. And I feel quite lucky. I think I'm grateful that I'm in a job that after literally decades of doing it, and might even be sort of seeing the end, that I still like it. I still like getting up in the morning and going to work.
And you'll continue doing that for the next 5 years?
We'll see how long.
Belle, all the more power to you, my dear.
Thank you. And I have to tell you, I've learned a lot from you over the years. This is not just a one-way thing.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I am.
No kidding. Thank you so much for being our Woman in Focus.
Thank you.
Belle Puri has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.